Right, good evening everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Local Plan Committee. I am the Chair, Councillor Tim Young. This meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. Just start with a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening. So if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the grand jury room by going back through the main entrance and down the stairs or via the staircase at the side of the building and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Ronald Street. We may have a short break at 7:30 p.m, subject to the progress of business. I think almost certainly we will. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. Okay, introductions. I'll go round the table and ask the panel and officers to introduce themselves, starting with the Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Good evening. Councillor Michelle Burrows, Liberal Democrat, Wevenhoe Ward. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis Barber, Lexington Braeswood Ward.
Councillor Rees-Smithson, Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward, and I am substituting for Councillor William Sunnox.
Lee Scordis, Councillor for Old Heath, Hive and Rowhead.
Richard Kirkby-Taylor, representing Castle Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Smith, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Nick Spindler, Shrub End Ward.
Evening all. Chris Pearson, Labour Councillor for Beerchurch. I'm substituting for Councillor Rippingate.
Bethany Jones, Principal Planning Policy Officer.
Aaron Ashwood, Active Environments Officer.
Good evening, Shelley Blackaby, Principal Planning Policy Officer.
Yara Saxby, Planning Contributions Officer.
Simon Gaines, Joint Head of Planning.
Sandra Scott, Place Strategy Manager.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you everybody. Item 2 is substitutions. I think there's been announced that Councillor Dundas for Councillor Sunnox and Councillor Pearson for Councillor Rippingale. As the news was broke last week at full council, Councillor Rippingale gave birth to a baby boy, a healthy baby boy last week, and so she is now on maternity leave. So you're very welcome. Urgent items, Rob? There are none. Declarations of interest. Any councillors got any interests they wish to declare tonight? Nope. Item 5 is the minutes. Can I invite the committee to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 24th of May 2023 and the 2nd of October 2023? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, item 6 is general have your say. We have got quite a list of guests and visiting councillors, so I'm going to take the guests first. I'm sure visiting councillors will understand why, although I did say Councillor Lilly could speak first. He needs to go. So I know there are a lot of speakers on Middlewick, so all those will be taken apart from Councillor Lilly at the same time, and then the officers will answer the en-bloc issues that arise rather than do it one at a time. So Councillor Lilly, please have your say. You did ask me if you could go first, and so I'm always willing to accede to your requests. And you know the score. Away you go when you're ready, Mike.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to go first. And good evening, everybody. I think that Middlewick Range is very contentious and has been for some time. But what worried me a lot was the latest statement by the MOD and their so-called add an extra land on to what they want to build on already. And to me, that rings so many alarm bells when developers say this. And MOD are a developer in as much as they don't build the houses, but they sell sites for building on. So it leads me to now to have a complete change of view, and the fact that we now need to remove Middlewick Ranges from the local plan. I don't trust what the MOD say when they come up with in the future, but we need to protect all that grassland, and the sooner we do that, it's actually moving closer to East Island Woods now, and that worries me as well. Will that go in the future? Will they just suddenly add that on as a by chance, and then all of a sudden, after they build 1,000 homes, if they get permission, oh, we've got a bit of land here, let's go for this one as well, shall we? And to me, it's gone far too much now of protection as to we need to tell them, send them a story, that it needs to be removed from the local plan. It needs to be given to the people of Colchester as a nature reserve. And we, as a council who declared a climate emergency, improving air quality around the town, instead of concreting over all that grassland, getting rid of all that wildlife, we need now to put in thousands of trees and turn it a proper nature reserve for the people of Colchester and the people of Old Heath, the Hive, who walk that every day, and they would lose that. It's gone now from beyond providing homes, and they won't provide affordable homes, and none of us can afford affordable homes anyway, as reality is such. They're not council houses. I don't trust them. It needs to be removed from the local plan, and we need to have a nature reserve in there now. Keep the wildlife where it is. They've lived there for some time. Who are we to suddenly transport all that wildlife to somewhere else? We wouldn't do it to humans. Let's protect the wildlife. Let's protect the grassland, the trees, and let's protect the Wick from development now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. As I said, Mr. Cairns will answer all the points regarding Middlewick when the Have Your Say section is over, because I'm going to ask for the non-Middlewick contributions now. So I'm going to start with Liz Austin, please. Hello, Liz. You have 3 minutes. A bell will sound after 2 to say you've got a minute left, and then again after 3. So when you're ready, the time will start when you press the button.
Just before we start, are people aware that I'm speaking on behalf of CO1 North Residents Association?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. And are you aware the topic is about the Riverside development?
Yes.
So the conversion of big office blocks into residential.
Yeah. Fire away
units.
when you're ready, and your 3 minutes will start.
Okay.
Thanks, Liz.
So, to give a little background, original planning for the site was submitted back in 2021, and the approval meeting took place 2 days before the changes to regulations governing permitted development, changes which would have brought much greater scrutiny to the plans. A series of objections were voiced and documented by residents and planning committee members, but they were put aside as council hands were tied by permitted development regulations. As the approval was signed off, the meeting chair expressed the hope that this would turn out to be a worthwhile project. And I'm afraid so far that hope has not been met. To bring you up to date, after a long delay in actually starting, all work on site stopped this spring. The site appears deserted, with construction detritus, heavy machinery, building equipment all lying abandoned. Window frames have been left without glass and are open to the elements, meaning the buildings are now visibly deteriorated. Council Building Control has inspected and deemed the site secure and safe, even though nothing was going on. One security guard remains on site 24 hours. However, we can report that these security measures are insufficient. Police have had to respond to incidents of vandalism involving risk of fire and accident. Perimeter break-ins are clearly visible, and recorded antisocial behaviour incidents have included drug dealing, burglary, squatting on the site and in the adjacent private garages across from the site, which for now are beyond the reach of our disabled residents. Council planning made clear that it has no remit to investigate why work has stopped. Through our own investigations, our association has learned the following. The company with registered ownership of the property is now being managed exclusively by a private equity firm. The firm is in dispute with its prior Riverside project partner and has therefore stopped all development funding. The main contractor and subcontractors tell us they are constantly facing bankruptcy. We further discover that this equity firm is linked to other failed and widely condemned conversion projects. The firm has been exposed as funding construction companies with business modules described as human warehousing, and a prominent Conservative MP accused them of creating modern ghettos for the vulnerable. I want to conclude by saying we request that the council officially and urgently ascertain whether the registered owner has the financial standing to complete or not. We'd like to see how this matches up with earlier due diligence from the approval process. We want to know who in the council should be monitoring the progress on the approved plan. Surely the answer can't be no one. Our association requests the council to take responsibility now and to investigate the actions of the developers who need to be held to account and ongoing scrutiny, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. If you stay there, I'll turn your microphone off if you would for now. You'll get another minute. It's not really a matter for the local plan committee, but we do have the joint head of planning here, and I'm sure he'll be able to give you an answer, and we might follow up in writing if his answer isn't as comprehensive as you may wish. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Officers are clearly very sympathetic to the problems that have been experienced by the local community, and indeed we have been in detailed dialogue with the group. And we have also followed up with multiple site visits, the involvement of the Council's Building Control Service, Community Safety Team, Planning Enforcement, and the Police Service, all of which have inspected the site and have drawn the same conclusion. There is no actionable breach at the present time. We've made a commitment to the group. We will keep the site under review, and we will do that. And should there be anything actionable under either planning, building control, or any of the related powers that sit with the City Council, we will take the relevant action. However, stalled sites may be uncommon in Colchester, but in other boroughs they are not. And we are facing unprecedented times of soaring build costs and viability becoming increasingly difficult. We do not have the resource to investigate the financial resources behind developments, and indeed that's not the council's role. However, we will seek to monitor the site, and we have passed on details of the developer to other potential interested parties who may be able to take the site forward, but you'll appreciate that's commercially confidential and I can't comment further on that. But all I can say is you have our sympathy, we are with you, we are monitoring the site, and we will take any action that is open to us. But at the present time, we do not believe there is an actionable breach.
Thank you, Simon. Before you have your extra minute, I'm going to be very lenient and allow Councillor Smith, who's portfolio holder for housing, to make a very brief comment.
Sorry, I was just going to declare an interest that I've been quoted in the local press criticising the developer on this particular site. I wasn't going to do anything further than that, but I felt that I should declare that as an interest.
Okay, I'm not sure it is, but you've declared it anyway. Liz, you have another minute if you wish to use it.
Possibly my colleague Fran, also in the association, may want to use some of that minute. I would just like to say that I'm sorry that it seems to be left to the Residents Association then to carry on investigating what is happening, and we will report back to you on that. And we are also aware that newspapers are now getting involved in looking into the background to the entities that have been involved in this project. Is there anything more you want to say, Fran?
You have to use the microphone if you want to, and I don't know how much of the minute you've got left, but very quickly, Fran, if you wouldn't mind.
Quick, yes. I think it was briefly referred to because of the time factor, but the disabled residents or elderly residents and disabled as well on the Riverside cottages have been kept from accessing proper routes because their route was cordoned off by the developers as soon as the work started. So the only access they have now, because they used to be able to go up a path into the garages into Colchester Road, and now they have to go up very steep steps which come from the Riverside cottages, and they simply don't or can't unless someone's out watching them. They're 90 odd, they are elderly, some are disabled, and yeah. So that is another really worrying factor to this thing, this issue that is just not really going forward for the Residents Association. Okay. Thank you for giving me the extra time.
Not a problem. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Liz. If you wouldn't mind turning off the microphone, that would be really helpful. Oh. Thank you. Simon's heard all that, and I'm sure you will keep in correspondence with our planning and building, planning enforcement team and building control. And as Simon said, the council is monitoring this situation very, very closely. Thank you. Sir Bob Russell, I don't think you're on Middlewick tonight, are you? No. So I'll have Sir Bob, please. And I think Sir Bob knows the score very well.
Thank you, Chairman. No, not Middlewick tonight. So you've got the first team out behind me. But I do welcome the comments from Councillor Lilly. So there we go. No, Chairman, this is to do with Salary Brook and what is laughingly called the Tendring Colchester Borders Garden Community. At the meeting on Monday the 9th of October, the minutes of the meeting the 27th of February were signed off as a true record. And the reason I mention that is obviously now officially minuted as to what the policy should be. And I asked at that meeting on the 27th of February, I want it clearly defined that land, nothing on the Salary Brook slopes will be built on visible from Longridge and Grinstead Estate. Now, I've been around the track many times, so it's important to get these things minuted. That's why I raised it. And Mr. Gary Guyver, the Director of Planning, Tendring District Council, responded, and I'm going to read out what the minute says. Confirmed that the allocation of land for development was not on the land which formed part of the slopes of Salary Brook. And in terms of intervisibility between Grinstead and the development, he further confirmed that it was planned to use the existing natural landscape to maximise the ability to screen the development from that area. Now, that's quite clear. That was what was stated in February, and that was confirmed as an accurate record at the meeting on Monday, the 9th of October. But you may recall, Chairman, that at that meeting, I did point out that since February, a school had appeared on the brow of the hill. Where did that come from? It gets even more mysterious, because on Saturday, the 2nd December, there's a garden village consultation at first sight, which I went to. The school has gone to be replaced by housing on the brow of the hill. So back in February, the joint committee was told there'll be nothing on the brow of the hill. Come October, there's a school, elected members agreeing all this, and then on the 2nd December, the school on the brow of the hill's gone, and we've now got houses on the brow of the hill. So who's actually running the show? Is it the councillors? Is it the officers? Is it the developers? It cannot be right, Chairman, that when the elected councillors make a decision and then confirm it at the next meeting, that within weeks, somebody has deleted a school which hadn't been there before and replaced it with houses. That can't be right.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Yeah, it's a matter, as you know, for the joint committee. I'm sure you will bring it up at their next meeting, but is there any officer who wishes to comment on this? Sandra?
Just make a brief comment. I think I wasn't at the meeting and I haven't seen the minutes that you're referring to, but the DPD for the garden community, as you know, is subject to examination, and the policy that proposals will be considered against is what will be confirmed through that examination process, and other information that it may be around in looking at consulting and engaging on the detail will follow through planning at a later stage, following the adoption, hopefully, of the DPD to set the policy for the garden community.
Thank you, Sandra. You have another minute, Sir Bob?
Chairman, elected councillors have made a decision. The minutes stating that decision have been confirmed. Nobody should be changing a decision made by councillors. So somebody has decided to put a school on the brow of the hill, then take the school away and stick houses there. We need to know who's making the decision, because I always assumed that we elected councillors to make decisions and the officers carried them out. Now, that when is the next meeting of this joint committee? Nobody knows, because it won't take place until after the planning inspector has considered the garden community concept. So what is that inspector going to consider? Is he or she going to consider what the committee decided, or what somebody has come along and has overruled the decision of elected councillors?
Yeah, as you know, as a Greenstone Ward councillor, I share your concerns very much. All I can do is speak to the Colchester City Council members on the joint committee, ask them if they've got a date for that next meeting, and we will, I'm sure, both of us raise our concerns at that next meeting. We will let you know as soon as we know. Thank you, Sir Bob. Can I confirm that everybody else who wants to have their say tonight is going to speak about Middlewick? Anybody not going to speak about Middlewick? Okay, I will do them in the order that I've got in front of me. We're starting off with via Zoom, Dr. Jeremy Dagley, if he's around and available. There he is.
Thank you, Chair.
Dr. Dagley, you have 3 minutes. A bell will sound after 2 and then again after 3. It will start, the time will start when you begin to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Dr. Jeremy Dagley, Director of Conservation at Essex Wildlife Trust, and also a Director of Essex Ecology, formerly ECOS, a nature conservation consultancy and commercial subsidiary of the Trust that has provided ecological advice to your council on local wildlife sites and planning matters. Essex Wildlife Trust is the county's leading wildlife conservation charity. My statement this evening is in response to your local plan review, which is covered in item 7 on the agenda. In item 7, it is clear that your council's starting point and immediate focus is the enhancement of Colchester's green network. Essex Wildlife Trust warmly welcomes this strong commitment to creating a better environment. To succeed, this ambition to enhance the green network relies crucially on Colchester's designated local wildlife sites. My statement tonight highlights one very special but threatened local wildlife site, Middlewick Ranges. Middlewick Ranges is an outstandingly important site for wildlife, not only for Colchester, but for Essex and the wider region. At 76 hectares, it is one of the largest local wildlife sites in the area, and on its own represents nearly 4% of the district's complete local wildlife site acreage. With tens of hectares of rare acid grassland habitat, Middlewick Ranges encompasses the largest extent in North Essex and is of similar ecological importance to Epping Forest SSSI's acid grasslands. As Natural England's letter of the 28th of June 2022 to your council emphasised, the significance of its special acid grassland is likely to have been underestimated. And yet this local wildlife site is threatened with development. Of real concern to the Trust is that its insect biodiversity was not addressed sufficiently during the local plan preparation. In the Trust's opinion, Middlewick Ranges is almost certainly now of national importance for insect biodiversity. ECOS advised your offices in early 2021 that the site, with more survey work, could reach a level to be considered a SSSI level quality. New data was submitted to you by Essex Field Club and Butterfly Conservation in June 2022, supporting this, including at least 23 red data book species and a quarter of all Essex's known moths and butterflies. Natural England, in its letter to your authority, stated that it would expect this absolutely exceptional biodiversity to be properly safeguarded. In the face of the UK's deepening biodiversity crisis and climate crisis, and with your council's strengthened duties to enhance biodiversity, full protection of Middlewick Ranges wildlife is, in the Trust's view, essential. I am speaking for both the Wildlife Trust and Essex Ecology, or ECOS, as your former technical advisor, requesting and advising your council through its Green Spaces consultation now fully protects Middlewick Ranges and removes the current site allocation for houses there, providing revised housing allocations at alternative sites. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Dagley. I gave you a little bit more than 3 minutes because obviously all the speakers aren't going to get their extra minute because the officer will speak at the end of contributions. But thank you very much indeed. Feel free to keep following us on our YouTube channel. The next speaker is Richard Martin. Mr. Martin, you do know the score, of course. And the time will start when you hit the button.
Good evening. The following letter has been sent to Colchester Council from MForm from the RSP in relation to Middlewick Ranges. The Stantec ecological report and fundamental underpinning of the planning inspector hearing that acid grassland can be recreated. Dear councillors, Middlewick Ranges housing allocation. We write in relation to Colchester City local plan housing allocation for Middlewick Ranges. It has been brought to our attention that the developer's ecological evidence-based report, Stantec's report dated November 2020, relies heavily on a single case study to justify their compensation mitigation proposals. This case study relates to work undertaken at our Minsmere Reserve in Suffolk. This council will be aware of the mitigation hierarchy that sets out the series of steps in protecting ecological habitats from harm by development, namely avoid the damage in the first instance, mitigate by reducing adverse impacts, and lastly compensate where avoidance or mitigation is not possible, as per Essex Wildlife Trust letter to local plan dated 14th November 2021. Underpinning the latter are the fundamental principles that any mitigation or compensation must be bespoke, deliverable and effective. The RSPB wish to advise that the Council that Minsmere case study presented in the Stantec report is not comparable to analogous to the proposed compensation site for Middlewick Ranges, and we do not consider that any mitigation compensation would be suitably bespoke, deliverable or effective. We would not wish the work at Minsmere to be used to legitimise or justify the destruction of acid grassland or heathland priority habitats at Middlewick. The Minsmere case study was a strict habitat creation project with a conservation objective to create suitable habitat from farmland or of low biodiversity value for breeding stone curlews, one of the UK's rarest birds. It was not a replacement for sensitive ecosystems such as acid grassland, supporting an outstanding invertebrate assemblage of over 14,000 plus species known to exist at Middlewick. Fundamentally, the soil conditions at Minsmere are light, while those at the Middlewick compensation site are heavy, loamy clay, which are nutrient rich, currently provide important habitats in their own right. We would like to draw the Council's attention to the Planning Neutrality Report produced in conjunction with the Royal Town and Planning Institute and the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. These set out 12 principles of good spatial planning, and we wish to highlight finally, the Council will need to reconsider their responsibilities in relation to the emerging local nature recovery strategies. We wish the trust this. That's that part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Next speaker is Dougal Urquhart, please. Mr. Urquhart, you have 3 minutes. The bell will sound after 2 and then again after 3, and your time will start when you start speaking. Thank you.
Colchester Natural History Society. We're an active society that has been monitoring and surveying wildlife across North East Essex, including Middlewick Ranges, for the last 70 years. So we're older than the Essex Wildlife Trust. We have many very knowledgeable members in all fields of wildlife and habitat management, including many county and even national experts within our membership. The Society insists that Middlewick Ranges local wildlife site is taken out of the local plan to protect the incredibly rich biodiversity of the site. The wholly inadequate Stantec report of November 2020 misinformed the Council with its lack of actual species detail and downplayed the richness of the site for wildlife. That flawed Stantec report has already been critically pulled apart by the Midland Ecology Evaluation Report of February 2021. The Stantec report made such a mockery of the richness of Middlewick Ranges local wildlife site that members of the Society and Essex Field Club subsequently carried out a number of surveys of the ranges, including myself. Thankfully, we were allowed access this summer on a number of occasions inside the fence, and we were grateful the MOD gave us a key. All aspects of wildlife were surveyed. We've been amazed that the ranges have been found to support 1,480 species of invertebrate, including 167 species with a conservation status, proving the site is far richer than Stantec stated. As well as finding nationally rare species and red data book species, there are 15 Section 41 priority species of principal importance, doubling the number from 2 years ago. Nationally rare species include an amazing variety, including spiders, wasps, bees, beetles, bugs, moths, butterflies, and many others. Assessing the quality of habitat for invertebrates, there are 8 invertebrate microhabitat assemblages in favourable condition. This makes Middlewick Ranges one of the most important acid grassland sites in the whole of Essex, especially for invertebrates, and richer than many current SSIs in the county. Existing surveys have only scratched the surface in finding out what's present, partly due to the restricted access. Natural England have only recently been alerted to the latest set of data. A reminder, Colchester City Council has made a commitment in the local plan environmental policy ENV1. The lowland dry acid grassland is identified as a habitat of principal importance and as an Essex Biodiversity Action Plan habitat. This vast area of acid grassland has been allowed to develop naturally over hundreds of years. It will never be replicated in a matter of a few years or even decades, while the suggested mitigation measures also spell destruction of neighbouring rich grassland habitats too. Regarding the local plan, the Society draws the Council's attention to the forthcoming local nature recovery strategy, which will be in place by March 2015. So within 15 months, and before the next 5-yearly review of the plan, this is a new duty on all public authorities to have regard to relevant LNRS. So we just ask that the council takes this on board and adds appropriate wording to that plan.
Thank you, Mr. Urquhart. It's very kind. Yeah, thank you very much. The next speaker is Andrew Wilkinson, please. Same form, Mr. Wilkinson, 3 minutes, bell will sound after 2 and then again after 3, and the time starts when you start speaking.
Hello, my name's Andrew Wilkinson. I'm from Inform and we're one of the environment groups on Save the Middlewick campaign. I'm just going to confirm some of these things at the moment. Richard Martin told you about the RSPB letter. All members of the local plan committee got a copy of that letter this morning, as did some of the planners. It goes into the public domain now, so tomorrow morning it will be out. You've also heard from a previous speaker about the Essex Wildlife Trust wanting to distance themselves from the Stantec report. The Stantec report is now old and out of date and it's expired anyway. It also used biodiversity gain biometric that is not legal. They made up their own one. As from January, which the planners will confirm, they have to use the deframetric. So that report is null and void now. One thing we didn't realise, but it's been brought to our attention, but the mitigation lands where they was going to recreate the acid grassland is in itself an ecologically important site that has not been completely surveyed yet. So to move it there, that may be an important site in its own right. The local plan, lots of laws are changing at the moment, and some of the things regarding local plans. There's a new biodiversity thing that you've got to take into account in the climate mitigation. You've got the biodiversity SPD, that's on the website. Just like to ask the planners when the climate mitigation one is going to be ready, but they have to be taken into account. We just mentioned the local nature recovery strategy, which has to be in by March 25. That's obviously a year away. That's being worked on by Essex County Council at the moment. It has to be taken into account in your decisions. I can't read my own writing here now, so I'll leave that point. All I really want to say at the end of the day is a number of councillors have come to us. In fact, the majority of councillors have come to us now asking how we can get Middlewick removed from the local plan. So what we want to do is to work together with the council, councillors and the planning department for the technicalities of how we go about that process. That's all I want to say really. We just want to get it out and we'll work to get it out, but we want to know what the procedure is. There's obviously the green and the blue network strategy that's going on at the moment as well. So you've got various things that you've got to hit under that. And I'll converse with the planners direct on that because we're having some confusion with it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. If you mind turning off the microphone, that'd be great. Thank you. Next speaker is Dave Smith, please. Dave, I think you have been here before. You have 3 minutes. A bell will sound after 2 and then again after 3. And the time starts when you begin speaking. When you're ready, Dave, thanks.
I'm here tonight as a resident. My house backs onto the Middlewick Viron Ranges. Tonight I'm here to thank Colchester's elected councillors that previously approved the local plan, that the proposal for the housing on Middlewick Ranges to be built despite strong opposition. I'm here to thank those that have now changed their mind. It's rare for politicians to admit they were wrong and do a U-turn, and it pleases me and other people that some who voted for its inclusion in the local plan are now coming out and speaking up against it. For the MOD to now consider even more development than was originally proposed is absolutely absurd. Middlewick is not suitable for development for so many reasons that some people have spoke about tonight already. But I'm going to speak now from a different perspective. My concerns are also about the damage increased traffic will inflict on local residents and businesses. There's been a number of accidents at the junction of Abbots Road and Mersey Road because of the volume of traffic in the area. Last Thursday, a 7-mile work-related journey from Old Eve to Freighton took me 45 minutes. The roadwork in this part of Colchester simply cannot cope with increased traffic. I lived in this part of Colchester for almost 50 years. Traffic congestion is on the increase. The roads can't cope with what traffic we already have. And it's no coincidence that the flooding in Haven Road has increased as more homes have been built, adding pressure to the sewage works capacity in Haven Road. I would ask other councillors who are undecided at the moment, from all parties, please support the withdrawal of Middlewick from the local plan. You have it in your hands to go down in history as the elected councillors that did the right thing. A huge mistake was made including development at Middlewick in the local plan. There is now a chance for the people who made that mistake to put it right. The MOD and the Army have been welcoming Colchester for years, but it's pure greed leading the MOD policy to try and sell the land. My aspects on at these ranges, I want it to be remaining unspoilt as it is in its current form, in the hope that my grandchildren's grandchildren can enjoy it as I have. Colchester already has large areas that have become concrete jungles. Let's preserve one of the last unspoilt areas of Colchester for the people of Colchester. Colchester councillors, you have the chance to make a stand. I previously spoke out against this development. I was not happy with those who voted for it to be approved. It was rushed through in a panic to meet housing demand, but after a period of reflection, many have now seen it was the wrong decision. To all councillors, I say this: please make the right decision and take this out of the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next speaker is Ted Benton, please. Ted, I think you're familiar with the procedure. 3 minutes, bell will sound after 2, and time starts when you start speaking.
Okay, well, I'm coming in rather late, and a lot of the points that I wanted to make have already been made. So I'll be pretty brief. First thing I wanted to say actually is, having seen the advertising images that are being put out for the sale of this site, added yet another reason why we shouldn't destroy it. I mean, it is a wonderful piece of landscape. And, you know, I was actually moved by that image to think, you know, what on earth are they doing? Okay, well, the main thing I wanted to say was really to argue that Middlewick is irreplaceable. And it's important to argue that and to recognise that. It's irreplaceable for 3 reasons. One is it's a much loved amenity space for citizens. And that's the explanation for why more than 1,000 people objected to the proposal to have building houses on it. It's part of their lives, part of their memories, and it goes back generations, which brings me to the second reason why it's irreplaceable, and that is it represents a very long association between Colchester and Colchester Garrison. So it's had that link with the military for all those years. In fact, I checked it out today. Since the barracks were actually put in Colchester in during the Crimean War, so this has been under Ministry of Defence management for something like 150, 170 years. And that's important, not just because this is a significant part of Colchester's identity, but it's also important, this is the third reason, because that continuous management of the habitats of this large piece of land is the reason why it has such a rich and complex biodiversity. And that is the key reason why the mitigation proposed by Stantec is completely inappropriate, because that cannot be recreated. Something that's been managed in a suitable, sensible way for more than 150 years. You cannot replace the complexity of the wildlife and the soil bacteria and fungi and everything else within that brief period of time. It should never have been in the local plan. The reason it was, I think, is because the council was at that time radically misled by Stantec and also by an independent consultancy. And I think the evidence that's now been brought to bear, which was mentioned by my colleague, is sufficient to say that we have even more reason now to take it out of the local plan.
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, thanks.
You could switch the microphone off. Thanks very much. Our final public speaker is Lisa Cross, please. Lisa, you come to the table, and 3 minutes, bell will sign it off 2, and then again after 3. Time starts when you start speaking. Thanks, Lisa.
Local Plan Committee, I've been here before. We have now, all of us, heard further strong and unignorably compelling evidence that the Middlewick Ranges should not be built on. This evidence not only refers to the rare habitat that's been mentioned and the designated local wildlife site, which is on smack bang in the middle of Middlewick Ranges, but also to the mitigation land, which forms part of a buffer zone to a triple SI. So the whole site is important. It's an important habitat in its own right. This has been stated many times by ecologists and naturalists to this council. What also has been stated is that you cannot recreate habitats by translocating ecosystems from A to B and expecting a whole host of species, as we've heard, over 1,400 different species. You can't expect them just to migrate to small designated areas. That approach is both destructive and counterproductive with regard to nature and biodiversity. We have very kindly a statement here by a renowned entomologist and ecologist, Stephen Falk. He is one of Britain's leading experts on pollinators, their identification, ecology, conservation and management, including acid grassland. And his statement, which I will proceed down, says, "I am astonished and disturbed by claims that high quality acid grassland can be recreated on unsuitable soils simply by adding sulphur. I would suggest there is a basic misunderstanding of what acid grassland actually is. Acid grassland is a complex ecological community. It's grassland that features a long historic continuity. To suggest that simply adding sulphur can recreate this ancient soil profile is one of the most controversial claims I've ever encountered during many years of working in nature conservation, should be treated with utmost suspicion. An expert opinion must be sought from bona fide grassland plants and insect experts at Natural England and wildlife trusts. This must not be allowed to happen." Fortunately for us here today, there are viable and potentially lucrative alternatives to building houses on this site, which can both boost nature and heritage. We can avoid the worst possible outcome. Save the Wick campaign and its associated naturalists and ecologists you heard from this evening. I'm sorry, may I continue?
You can have another 30 seconds.
Okay. We are willing to work with Colchester City Council. We look forward to helping you become a leader in providing rewarding, imaginative biodiversity projects.
We also invite you, councillors and officers, to come along to a specially organised naturalist-led walk across the Middlewick to hear firsthand what will be irreplaceably lost if housing development is pursued.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the public speakers. Going to ask visiting councillors now, starting with Councillor Dave Harris. I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Chair for a little while because I must take a comfort break. But Dave, please, and I'll be back as soon as I can.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing all the speakers today to come along and have their say over Middlewick. First of all, I want to start by saluting my colleague, Councillor Mike Lilly, for all the words he said earlier on, Chair, if I can. He had it absolutely spot on. He's absolutely right. We've campaigned for years to ask the MOD, the government, as it were, to take this site off the table. And they haven't done that. I wrote, Chair, to the Right Honourable Grant Shapps in early November when it first went on the market, and wrote to him appealing on two grounds, Chair. One was on the lack of infrastructure in the area to support a housing development of that size. And secondly, on the biodiversity and wildlife in that area. And you've heard many speakers tonight eloquently say about the strength of the arguments against building. Now, that letter was sent off. I had a letter back from Grant Shapps, which is I have with me tonight, and the Defence Infrastructure Organisation relates that as far as they're concerned, and Mr Shapps is concerned, they're going to continue with His Majesty's Treasurer's guidance of selling this surface land. That's in inverted commas, that's what they said. So they've said that they're actually adding a piece on to the bit of land. They're going to extend the piece. That's not in our local plan, as we know. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that the infrastructure, as we know, doesn't exist, as I've already said, and Mike Lilly said. There's no community centres, there's no shops, there's no employment, not enough to support a housing development. There's no school places, there's no doctor surgery places, there's no dentist surgery places that are available to serve such a community. So for me, the road network that Mike Lilly was talking about is absolutely right. You won't manage to put road network of that sort of infrastructure in there to serve that community. Onto the biodiversity. As far as I'm concerned, all the speakers were absolutely spot on tonight. I want to echo their sentiments. We can't allow this to happen. As I understand it, and I've been here before, Chair, as you know, I've been to this committee before and said this, and I'll say it again, the review process of this committee is on, I know it's on the agenda. I know that's going to be a factor here, and we've got to use that review process to prove beyond a shadow of doubt, and I believe we can, as you said, as you heard from all the other speakers tonight, to do that, use their evidence to actually demonstrate to the MOD we cannot do what they intend to do. So as far as I'm concerned, I was very disappointed in the Defence Infrastructure Organisation's letter, and Right Honourable Grant Shapps about his stance on it. In fact, he's being led by the Treasury, but Treasury and money is one thing. We cannot and must not allow the fact that the government wants money from that site to factor in what we want in our community. This is not what we would like to do. So I think I would join Mike Lilly's call and my call for a review to take that out of the plan and make no doubt about it, ensure that we have the residents on side. You've heard that tonight. I wrote the letter on behalf of residents, Chairman, when I wrote the letter to Grant Shapps. I did that because all the people that lobbied us as 6 councillors, Councillor Warnes, Pearson, Small, Lilly and Scordus, were all in my mind when I wrote that letter. And as far as I'm concerned, just take it out now and ensure that we don't go back to this in any future, in the future time. So please back the call for review and please take it out of the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry I had to miss the first bit. I got the gist, but it was nothing personal against you, It's very personal for me. The next speaker is councillor Faye Smalls. When you're ready, Faye, fire away.
Thank you. So I'd just like to thank all the speakers that have gone before me speaking on Middlewick. They've covered pretty much what I'm going to say. For people who don't know, I've been a local, sorry, I've lost where I am completely. So I became a local councillor in May 2023. So I wasn't part of the original local plan, but it's obviously become increasingly clear to me how important this issue is. So I'm speaking tonight to ask for Middlewick to be taken out of the local plan and be designated as a nature reserve for the benefit of local residents, the wider community, and ultimately to preserve this unique environment for future generations. So I wasn't, as I've already said, I wasn't part of the process that saw Middlewick included in the local plan, but I do understand it was controversial from the beginning. I don't want to overly focus on what happened before, as I'm sure at the time everyone was doing what they felt best, possibly with damage limitation in mind. We are now, however, at a point where we are reviewing the local plan, and there seems to be an increasing consensus that Middlewick should not be built on. I believe it's a strength to admit when things may have gone wrong and then try to rectify the situation. The local plan review seems an excellent opportunity to do just that. In the document pack that the committee members have tonight, on page 28, it's noted that one of the outcomes that emerged from a recent workshop on the local plan revision was a desire to protect areas of ecological importance. It's increasingly clear that Middlewick is such an area. I listened to Martin Pugh, who is a senior ecologist at Essex Wildlife Trust, raise his concerns with the Environment Panel last week. The local plan stipulates that any development on Middlewick should have a 44% biodiversity net gain. However, this can be achieved on a compensation site elsewhere. I have long had concerns about the viability of this, but not being an expert, I didn't really know what to think. So listening to an expert, and in fact listening to the people who've been speaking tonight, it seems increasingly likely that this unique site is destroyed. It cannot be produced elsewhere. Over recent days, I've been speaking to residents who live close to Middlewick Ranges, and as they have become aware that the site is now definitely up for sale, they are increasingly worried about losing this precious green space. The flats on Abbots Road do not have gardens and they don't have balconies. What they do have, though, at the moment is proximity to a unique area of nature that can be freely accessed. So my ask is, let's look at this again and campaign as a council for Middlewick Ranges to be designated as a nature reserve.
Thank you, councillor Smalls. Our next visiting councillor is councillor Martin Warnes, please. Thank you, Martin. Whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself, as previous speaker said, coming to this late and having a surname beginning with W as a councillor with a surname beginning with Y, but also know that often much has been said by the time you get to W or say. So therefore, I'm not going to go over the comments. I understand and take on board an awful lot of those comments that were said. And we find ourselves reviewing a local plan that many of us feel that we've only just settled. And here we are doing it again. And during that process, much have changed. And indeed, one of the flaws of the planning system, but I understand it can't be any different because the costs on the local government would be huge, is that once the landowner puts the site forward, we are reliant on them to provide the evidence for the council to consider. And we found shifting sands all through that process. And we now end up in a situation where some really good arguments have been made, and I, like Councillor Lilly and like Councillor Harris, has been spooked by the MOD repeating what they did during the local plan, which was to bring forward a site at the 11th hour once the council's consultation had actually been published. And here we are again, wanting to increase the size of the site. Now that does undermine people's ability to take them at their word. And it also brings up a point that I would like to add to the conversation, is that you have two distinct parcels of land. You have a growth area, which is called Middlewick Ranges, which has been put into the growth plan, and you have part of the existing MOD training area. One is north of the Brook, one is south. So you effectively have overlapping boundaries because you have two distinct parcels of land. And therefore, if you look at the process that the actual process that you have got before you tonight under item 8, page 61, paragraph 3.14, in situations where two or more distinct sites or broad locations overlapped, they will be assessed together as a whole. So it strikes me that there is an opportunity to consider whether there is an argument to actually review the whole of the Middlewick growth area. And it's also pointed out on page 8, on item 8, page 72, assessment criteria within any area of a local wildlife site. The National Planning Policy Framework encourages the protection and enhancement of sites of biodiversity. And it's if you look at that criteria, it's likely to either attract a red flag with over 50% of the site or an amber flag being under 50%. So again, I don't want to go over what's been said. We are at a stage where I think many of us have realised that Middlewick does have ecological importance, and we need to take a second look at this. And it's up to us to find the tools to be able to do that. As many of us have found the way that recent certainly the last decade of planning policy has been handed down by central government, is pitting councillors against local communities at a very local level. And I look forward to a time when there's some sanity brought back into the planning system and new town legislation is looked at once more, and the provision of housing need can be provided at a more strategic level. And don't forget, providing housing need is not all about affordable housing, important as that is. You've also got to provide a mix. And if this piece of extra land is to be used, as my colleague Councillor Harris says, in a letter from the Defence Minister, to be used as a woodland buffer between the current training area and Middlewick growth area, I too share fears that we could be looking at this all over again with another parcel of land brought forward. And I think there is an argument for saying, let's see whether we need to review the allocation, take control, and decide what goes there on behalf of the communities that we all represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. I share your pain as a member of the alphabetically disadvantaged, but we will do our best to get over that. Thank you. Before I ask, I think it's going to be Mr. Cairns who's going to lead off, and then Sandra, or the other way around. It'll be Sandra, then Mr. Cairns. We've got two statements. One from two cabinet members, one from Councillor Goss, and then from portfolio holder responsible for the local plan, councillor Luxford Vaughan. So, Rob, if you could read councillor Goss's statement first, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, statement from councillor Martin Goss. I am unable to attend tonight due to a pre-arranged Santa run in Mile End with the round table. However, I appreciate the committee allowing this statement to be read out. Middlewick Ranges has caused much distress and controversy since being mooted for sale by the MOD. It has also been used as a political football, which of course doesn't resolve the worries or concerns of residents locally or more widely in Colchester. The MOD have now decided to sell even more land, which opens the risk to even more housing on the site, roughly another 700 at least. It is time to take a fresh look at Middlewick and see whether the whole site can be removed legally from the local plan, or amendments are made to ensure that all the remaining land is not designated for housing is added as country park or protected wildlife area only. This would afford the majority of the site protection in perpetuity, including any new land for sale. Ultimately, no housing on the site would be the ideal goal, but as a minimum, we must protect the whole of the site and ensure it is added as protected land in the local plan. The local plan is there to protect areas we do not wish to be developed via the back door, and now we can start to consider a review of the local plan within the 5-year period. Removing Middlewick should be our ideal goal, with a fallback position of ultimate protection for the majority of the site. This will stop the MOD or future developer trying to come back with another desire for 2,500 houses as opposed to 1,000, or adding a further 700 to the newly included land. Time is to act now.
Thank you, Rob. And now if we could move on to the statement from councillor Luxford Vaughan, who is of course the portfolio holder with responsibility for the local plan.
Thank you, Chair. Some of you statement from councillor Andrea Luxford Vaughan. Some of you may be aware that the Ministry of Defence has recently put the site at Middlewick up for sale, and as the sales brochure is now in the public domain. In this brochure, the allocation is bigger than the land that is shown in our local plan, and therefore what is covered by our local plan policy. Obviously, the MOD are entitled to sell whatever land they wish, and we have no control over that. But to be clear, there has not been any dialogue with the MOD regarding the marketing of the site or the inclusion of the additional land beyond that of the allocated site in the local plan. Officers have had meetings post the adoption of Section 2 to encourage the MOD to revise the allocation in order to best safeguard the area of greatest ecological value, but these discussions were unsuccessful. The Council also has no influence over who the developer will be or what the timescales involved in developing the plot will be. The local plan allocation and policy requirements set out in policy SC2 will continue to apply to any proposal at the present time, despite the increased land being marketed. We do have a robust policy linked to a very strict land allocation shown on the policy's map, and any deviation from this would not be successful unless a developer provided conclusive evidence that a scheme could meet strict ecological requirements set out in the plan. Therefore, we should be reassured that if it doesn't meet policy, it won't get built regardless of what is in the sales brochure. Although I fully accept the limitations of mitigation, and I personally think net biodiversity legislation is not fit for purpose, we are no worse off than when the Council first adopted the plan. Any developer will need to negotiate a legal agreement for both of these policy determined elements, and we control that process by being able to refuse planning permission. It is worth pointing out, though, that the exact location of any mitigation site is not set in policy. The local plan could take account of any new evidence submitted, and therefore the Council has agreed and budgeted to appoint an independent ecological specialist to do further work on the site. The brief was drafted following advice from Natural England, and in response to feedback from ecologists, it was amended to extend the survey period. We also asked Colchester Natural History Society to recommend suitably qualified ecologists. We have now requested that the survey area is increased to align with the site area now being marketed for disposal. This work will involve information gathering throughout the seasons and is anticipated to supersede previous studies that were criticised at the Section 2 hearings. It is also relevant that ecological survey data is time limited, which for most, if not all, species updates from the earlier evidence will be required in any event. This evidence will then make the policy via the local plan review stronger in safeguarding ecology. The appointment has been delayed slightly because of discussions on budget allocations, but someone is engaged with a view to commencing work in the very near future. At this point in time, I'm unable to confirm who that is because those unsuccessful in the tender process have not yet been informed. The ecological work will feed into the policy requirement for master planning for the site. This work can't take place until a developer has engaged with the council, so I can't give a timescale to that either. But the policy requires a master plan to be agreed with the council prior to submission of an application. Officers are committed to working positively with members of the local community and elected members, and an engagement plan will be prepared. We have asked the MOD for an interim meeting to find out what they think the timescales of the sale may be. They're yet to respond to us. Councillor Andrea Luxford Vaughan.
Thank you, Rob. Very comprehensive statement. That's all the speakers and statements that we have. So I'm going to ask Sandra and then Simon to respond to all those points. But I think in particular, the one that stood out for me and probably for most councillors is the process of changes to the local plan, how that would work, because of course, the decision to adopt the local plan was made by full council, not by the local plan committee. So how that process works would be very important to people who spoke, and of course all the other points are of no less importance. But Sandra, if we start with you and then move on to Simon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and pick up as many of the comments that have been made as briefly as possible. So yes, firstly, just looking at process. So I think as it's been mentioned, and everyone in this committee is aware, we have started a local plan review, and an item later on the agenda includes reference to the approach that's going to be taken to looking at sites that are put forward, and the approach that we need to take in looking at allocated sites in the local plan review. I think it's important to say that right now it's premature to consider any site-specific matters which may be relevant to the local plan review. The opportunity to consider site allocations will follow further evidence updates and a full assessment of all the sites and the strategy that will follow for that local plan. Any sites that are allocated in the current local plan, which haven't got planning permission, will need to be considered at the appropriate time as part of the local plan review in order to consider the latest evidence and deliverability. We can't simply just roll forward unimplemented sites that are allocated in the current plan without, because the test of deliverability and suitability for the overall strategy will need to be revisited at the appropriate time in the local plan review. And I think the other point, so in terms of process, any look at this site needs to fall into the bigger picture of the local plan review. The evidence that will need to be done and is being done to inform the whole, on all subjects, not just ecology, but on all matters that will inform the strategy, the numbers, all of the evidence and the constraints and opportunities that the whole local plan will need to face. And the site at Middlewick, if it is one of those that needs to be reassessed, there's the opportunity to be considered as part of a bigger picture. Obviously, you take something out, it's like a big jigsaw, and you need to put something else in. But we've heard everything and understand everything that's been said on that this evening. Probably not much more to say on process. Just very quickly, in terms of where we are now, I think it's important to just restate, I think Councillor Luxford-Vaughan's statement did say it, what is out there in marketing material from the MOD, it is just that, it is not a proposal. It changes nothing in the context of what's in the local plan. The local plan is an allocated site with a very rigorous policy that was examined, and any proposal that in the event that that comes forward, whilst that policy is in place, it would need to be considered against that policy. It's not unusual for landowners and developers to own land that is beyond the size of an allocated site. So I understand the alarm bells and the concerns about the MOD's site area not corresponding with the allocated site. But that doesn't say that this council has not considered a larger area of development. What is in the only part of it that has got any status or context in policy terms at this point in time is the site that's allocated and the policy that goes with that. Just looking at some of the, coming back on some of the comments on ecology, I think it's been said, I think that the evidence that was prepared for the local plan examination, there's the merits or otherwise of that evidence. It's not for this committee to go into that. That was presented at the examination with all of the a good number of objectors challenging that and interrogating that, and that was fully examined and has resulted in the inspector confirming the allocation with the policy measures that were put in place to ensure that appropriate mitigation and the proper approach to biodiversity net gain is the policy ensures that will need to apply when any proposal is considered. And likewise, really, for all of the other infrastructure, the traffic impacts will need to be assessed and mitigate against. The social infrastructure will need to provide for adequately for the additional development. All of that is set very specifically and thoroughly in the policy as it stands at the moment. And then just to confirm that we have very recently confirmed that additional ecological surveys of invertebrates and botanical surveys to be carried out by an independent ecologist. And I think, as referred to by in Councillor Luxford-Vaughan's statement, we have engaged in arriving at who to appoint for that work with the Colchester Natural History Society, who not only had sight of the draft brief, but also recommend ecologists. And although we can't say who's appointed, that has resulted in an appointment that did come through that engagement with the Natural History Society. I think that's all I want to say at the moment, and if there's anything anyone thinks I've missed, then I'll try and cover it. And that's Simon, I don't know if you've got anything else to add.
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Not really a great deal to add. I think Sandra and the portfolio holder explained very thoroughly. You have a very detailed site allocation policy in place, and all of those criterion would have to be met for any development to be supported on the site. In terms of the methodology, as Sandra's explained, and indeed you have a report coming forward this evening, the SLAR methodology, all of the current allocations will be reviewed, and all of the evidence base will need to be refreshed, particularly the ecological evidence, which is now thoroughly timed out. and a new evidence base will be required for assessment. So I think there is absolutely no need to panic. You have a very robust policy framework in place, and you have a methodology going forward, as detailed in tonight's report, for that to be reviewed in due course.
Thank you, Simon. Can I thank all members of the public and visiting councillors for their contributions tonight. The first two items on our agenda are about the Colchester local plan review, so you may wish to stay for those. I'm going to start item 7. There's 15 minutes before we have our first break. And so we will start with item 7, which is the Colchester local plan review, proposed vision engagement and progress update. And that's back to you, Sandra. Please to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Following on from previous reports to the Local Plan Committee in August and October, work is progressing with the Local Plan Review with a focus of creating a better environment. In accordance with the iterative approach to issues and options agreed by the committee, consultation is underway on the green networks and waterways. A vision for the Local Plan Review is required to provide high-level principles upon which the plan is based. To be effective, a vision should be focused and specific and genuinely shaped by communities, as well as being informed by other stakeholders and baseline evidence. To inform the initial work on the vision, a member workshop was held, the feedback from which is summarised in the report at paragraph 5.7 and in and 5.8, I think, and in Appendix A. Members were asked to consider the best things about Colchester as a place and the best opportunities for Colchester up to 2041. A similar workshop was held with officers, planning officers, with key points summarised at paragraph 5.11 and 5.12 in the report. The discussion at both member and officer workshops demonstrated how intrinsically linked the key themes are. This will be important in defining the vision and objectives, with a need to ensure that these links are effectively recognised. As indicated, it's important that the Local Plan Review vision is genuinely shaped by communities and stakeholders. Building on the engagement with members and officers, it's proposed to engage more widely with communities and stakeholders in the new year. It's recommended that this engagement be online and that in doing so, all are invited to answer the 3 questions. What 3 things do you like best about Colchester City, the local authority area, as a place? What do you think are the most important opportunities for Colchester looking ahead to 2041? And what 3 things would you most like Colchester to be known for in 2041 and beyond? This committee is asked to agree to this engagement to commence in the new year. The report also summarises other progress on the local plan review, and a report on the strategic land availability assessment is included in the next agenda item. Future reports will update on the call for sites and other themes and issues and options. Work on evidence base will continue in the new year, including on housing and employment needs, infrastructure, environmental considerations and sustainability appraisal to help inform the preferred options local plan review. I think that's probably all I want to say. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra. Any questions? Remember, we are focusing here on the vision engagement and progress update. The next report is about call for sites and the SLAR. So on this particular issue, who have we got? Councillor Dundas, Councillor Pearson, and then Councillor Burrows.
Yeah,
in that order, please.
I'll be brief. This might sort of crosses over with the next item, and actually the last item. But this is the review item. I mean, one thing perhaps you didn't make clear in your answers to some of the members of the public is the question. I think the chair raised it actually. Is the practicalities of removing a site in the review. Now, if a site is removed because we choose to do so, what potential, if any, liability does that leave on the council as part of this process? What I'm basically saying candidly is if we took Middlewick, for example, out of the local plan, the allocation out because we decided we wanted to, and it's either been sold or the MOD then see a massive reduction in its value. If we haven't got a good reason for having done so, are we then liable basically to be sued or something similar?
I think that's probably more the next item, but as
It
you've
probably
raised
is, to be fair, yeah.
I will let the officers, because I did raise it as well, and I think it was a decision of full council. It will presumably have to go back to full council if such radical changes are made to local plan. Could you just confirm that, please, Sandra?
Yeah, I think, apologies for not answering it clearly. I think what I was trying to say, and I will answer that last point in a moment, but because we're doing a local plan review, we'll end up with a new local plan. And as everyone in this committee knows, that everything on a local plan needs to be evidence-based. So if by going through the process of the local plan review, looking at everything in the round, looking at all of the new evidence, that leads to a local plan that removes Middlewick and has housing allocated wherever it is allocated for whatever the needs are that we need to accommodate, then that will go through a process that will be that would need to be evidence-based and justified, and then it would the decisions would need to be made in the same way and end up at an examination where all parties would have the opportunity to put in their representations, which would be heard at an examination, to then finally end up with a plan, hopefully, that would we then be able to adopt, which would be a full council decision. I don't, because we're at the stage where we've already started work on the local plan, doing something independently at a different pace on Middlewick alone doesn't seem to have any justification. And I think that the timescales, because of the need to evidence-base it, and because we're already there and we're already starting, and you need to go through looking at your strategy, your numbers, the consequential impact, that if you, like the domino effect, that if you, I don't think we're looking at doing something, as an officer, the advice would be that there isn't any advantage or value or particular justification to have that on a separate track, because we're already started the review, and that's a more usual approach to go, and we're doing it anyway, and Middlewick will fall within the consideration through evidence as the council and the committee follows in the future.
Thank you, Sandra. I think your jigsaw puzzle analogy earlier was very apposite, and one we should always bear in mind. Okay, I've let the genie out of the bottle. I'm not going to try and get it back in, so we'll carry on this tack. Councillor Pearson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just with regard to that last comment, I think Middlewick, we have to see, especially based on what we've heard this evening from all the contributors to Have Your Say, is a unique part, a unique site in the local plan. And given that the MOD has jumped the gun and is intending to market the site, I think that we should at the very least be putting Middlewick at the top of the review process, though, that anyone who might, any organisation, any potential buyer out there would do so at their own peril. I think we've heard so much this evening that suggests that there are legitimate reasons why we should never have included this in the local plan in the first instance. And I think we ought to just remind the MOD of the millions of pounds that the Treasury has actually gained from selling sites all over the city over the last few decades. In my ward in Beerchurch, we've got 3 new neighbourhoods, plus Leafy Grove and Friday Woods that have been there for a quarter of a century. So we should remind ourselves that this is very much Treasury driven. It's not about doing the best for the residents of Colchester. from what we've heard this evening, this is a unique site that should be preserved for the residents of Colchester as a nature reserve in perpetuity. And I think that we ought to take the advice and guidance that we've been given this evening, plus our own study that will be taking place, ensure that all of those are brought back to the local panel as part of the review, as a priority over everything else that we review in the local plan.
Anything to respond to, Sandra? No, thank you. Councillor Burrows, you're next, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask with regards to the consultation, how are you intending to engage with harder to reach communities? Who are you reaching out to, and what kinds of involvement will you be doing with these communities? I ask because I'm really concerned that harder to reach communities have time to input their voices and to be heard. Thank you.
Well, primarily the intention is to do of reaching out to particular groups in a managed way, and happy to take that away and sort of think about very focused engagement where it's the online is not reaching out to the right audience.
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Burrows. It's a very important point. Thank you. Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Burrows has pretty much hit my question on the head straight away. I have a suggestion. Is this not something we should be talking to our parish councils about, particularly as they have the ability to talk to small numbers of residents on a more regular basis? Can we not engage them to do some of this consultation that won't be online? Because in my ward, there are a lot of people who won't be able to complete it if it's all online.
Yes, certainly happy to include parish councils. I think particularly through ward members, involvement in that as well. And I think intentions to engage on widely on matters as we progress through the local plan review through parish councils is something that's very much on our radar. So I think again we can take that away and consider how best to do that as part of the vision engagement and linked to other engagement as well.
Thank you. Councillor Burrows, you want to come in and quickly on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. In Chelmsford City Council, they have an access group that help be a critical friend in lots of kind of public realm issues. And I was just wondering if we have a similar thing, and if this would not be a really good opportunity to look at developing an access group where we could invite people from different communities that are harder to reach, that we might also know from our own parish wards, to involve them in discussion on this. It'd be really good.
Yeah, I would. It would be brilliant if there was a group, and I know we've tried we've tried to sort of identify, because I know many authorities do have a very specific access group. I think any leads we have that might enable us to work with a specific group who represent needs of the access needs would be welcomed. And then we have also got the opportunity to work with the residents panel as well, which I think we would also consider doing as part of slightly wider engagement.
Before I bring in Councillor Barber, we mustn't forget the non-parish areas and residents association. I know Councillor Smith was going to say it. He always does, and so do I. Residents, no, certainly not get parished. Cool, no. In resident associations, community associations in non-parished areas are very important groups to consult with, because it's the same in my ward. There will not be a big uptake online to the consultation necessarily. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report this evening. Firstly, can I say I warmly welcome that so many members seem to have come along to the line of thinking on Middlewick that actually there is merit in not including it in the plan, even if the MOD are selling the site, so that's welcome. On the specifics of the agenda item this evening, when we approved this in October, one of my concerns that I raised on the evening was a statement from the cabinet member who seemed to diverge slightly from the report recommendation that we had in front of us at the time. And I raised as my concern then that there could be two parallel strains of work. If the cabinet member has one view and the local plan has another, and those are not necessarily aligning, there would be a crunch at some point between the two potentially. I feel it would be useful when having these updates, if we did have a comment, if we could maybe invite the cabinet member to have a comment on the report as well as an appendix, just so we're aware of what her views are at any point, unless any members of the executive who happen to be on the committee this evening also want to make a comment. But I just am concerned at the political realities that we could have a situation where we're doing one strain of work and then the portfolio holder has another view. And I'd just like to be reassured of her view as we go through this process. If that's possible, feasible, I think it would be quite useful for members to be aware of their view. Thank you.
Before I bring you in, Sandra, I think it is important that we hear what the portfolio holder and the cabinet's view is, but of course the local plan committee has its own decision-making powers and we are independent in that sense from the cabinet. But important, as I agree with you, that we know what the view is. Sandra, anything to add to that?
Only just to say, yeah, I don't. I can see the value in it, but we do have portfolio holder briefings, and I can assure you that at every briefing we always brief what's coming to local plan committee, and provide the opportunity to get any kind of feedback that might influence, you know, the consideration or that's important to bring to the committee or to factor into the report. But I, you know, can certainly pick that up with the portfolio holder. Thank you.
I've got two more speakers and I intend to bring this item to a close and have a break. First one is Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and thank you to the other speakers who've already raised most of the points that I was going to make on regarding inclusion. I have concerns about an online-only survey because that does exclude significant sectors of the community, those who have difficulty accessing the internet through economic reasons or what have you, and many of the elderly whose technical skills are about the same level as mine, and people know how much I struggle with the technology on occasions. So I'm pleased to see that, and I'm very pleased that we're going to also include residents' associations in there. I can think of certainly one in my own ward that we're very keen to get involved on this. What I would also say is that actually the fact that we're having these discussions about the situation at the ranges shows the value of actually having a local plan. If we did not have a local plan, imperfect though it may be, the developers would be in there like a shot, going with a presumption in favour of development. So having a local plan, even an imperfect one, is better than having none, and it shows the importance of getting it right. And part of getting it right is that we've got to be evidence-based. It can't just be Councillor Young, Councillor Bowers, whatever, thought this was a good idea. They've got to have the evidence. So anything which makes it look like we're being biased by fast-tracking one site over the others would leave us open to challenge. And I'm sure no one on this panel, or indeed members of the public, want to do that. Because what's important is that we have a local plan that survives the interrogation by the inspectors and by people who've got very strong vested interests in particular sites, be it the ranges or be it other ones. And we need to be very clear on that what we're doing is on a consistent basis, assessing all sites on their merits. One final question, there was talk about the site rating as a triple SSI. How can that be achieved? What's the process for that? Is it one that can be done quickly, or is it going to take 20 years?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Sandra?
Yeah, I think the only question in there was the final point, because I would agree with the other points you made. Designation of a special scientific interest is Natural England responsibility, and I don't know exactly how long the process takes, but I know there have been requests for them to designate, and they, that's for them to consider.
We will take that answer and put our faith in Natural England's processes. I did want to say, I presume we will work with the digital inclusion team of the council, who are very good in the consultation, so we make sure we do get everybody's views. Those who don't have access to digital means, then that's very important. And our digital inclusion team do make sure that they are heard. Finally, Councillor Scordis.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry to kind of focus on the genie that's been let out the bottle. Have to echo a lot of the comments made by Councillor Pearson, my ward neighbour, as well as my fellow ward councillors and neighbours that have spoken at Have Your Say about Middlewick, and it does link to our members' workshop that we had that was really helpful. But the opportunities we looked at are protection of areas of ecological importance, which Middlewick certainly is, environmentally friendly, less congestion. We know that the south has really poor road network that you can't expand unless you're going to compulsory purchase some houses that are already there, and it already has poor active travel and public transport links. So I think Middlewick does really have to be looked at, and we are currently as a council offering residents to write in of where they think we should have protected green spaces, and I imagine many of those comments have come back and said, oh, you've already got one, Middlewick Ranges, please don't get rid of it. So I think this is going to be an ongoing saga. It's interesting that no one has purchased the site yet, because it was actually announced for sale in 2016, not officially, but the MOD announced they were going to sell it, and you imagine deals would have been made behind closed doors. I imagine the work that council officers put in to put in some pretty hard parameters for people to build on that site has put off developers. Perhaps also the kind of economic situation we're in at the moment may have had an impact there. But really, I don't want to echo too much of what people said. I think they've raised the important views on Middlewick. On the consultation itself, I think it's really important there is like a drop-in session, whether it is at the town hall, the old library, wherever, because it's not just elderly people who can't use the internet. I've met people in their 40s who struggle with the internet, and they're going to be seeing Colchester through to 2041. So I think it's important they do get their say. And we know that the amount of people that do take notice of local politics is very small, not just shown by how many vote in local elections, but just generally participate. And it's actually really good to see quite a big crowd here today. But as we know, most committee meetings, you're lucky if one person's there. So I think it's important we try and highlight this where we can, whether that is some nice posters on the notice boards outside. Parish councils have got notice boards, and unparished areas will have notice boards at community centres. So it's worth reaching out to them. It could even be just a QR code. So people who are on the internet may not be on Facebook, social media, but they can do it, and then offering details of maybe can drop into a certain area to see what plans are, how they can feed back. That would be my main thing from this that we could improve.
Thank you. I don't think there's any need to respond to that. Good points. So I'm going to move to the recommendations, but 2041 does seem an awful long way away, but of course it comes around very soon. The most important things about 2041 is that Councillor Harris and I will celebrate landmark birthdays, hopefully that year. We will leave you to guess what they will be. But can I bring the committee's attention to the recommendations, which I'm going to take them on block. Note the progress made on the local plan review, and to agree public engagement in early 2024 to inform a vision for the local plan review. Can I see all those in favour, please? That's unanimous, I think. Rob? Okay, it's 7:40, so we'll take a 10-minute break. Please be back in your seats promptly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Start the meeting, whether members are back in their seats or not. We're missing Councillor Smith, Councillor Pearson, Councillor Scordis and Councillor Burrows, so I better wait for her. Well, I think we are quorate without them. I'm tempted to agree. I will give them 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 1. Okay, we'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is the local plan review again, strategic land availability assessment methodology. And Beth, you're going to lead off on this. Please introduce the report.
Thank you. So the Strategic Land Availability Assessment, or SLAR, appraises sites for their suitability, availability and achievability with the aim of objectively determining which sites may be deliverable over the plan period. Following agreement at the last local plan committee meeting, the draft methodology has been subject to a 4-week public consultation. As we heard earlier, the call for sites has also been launched and closes on the 5th of January. Following its close, an update will be provided to local plan committee in the new year. 12 representations have been received to the draft methodology from a mix of developers and land promoters, members of the public and statutory consultees. A summary of each representation and officers' response has been provided as an appendix to the report. Officers also held a workshop with colleagues within the Planning Service and Essex County Council in November to discuss the draft methodology. The SLAR methodology has been updated to take account of the consultation responses and the officer workshop. The revised methodology is provided in full as an appendix to the report. A number of changes have been made to provide greater clarity, consistency and to remove ambiguity. Updates have also been made to align more closely with the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF. The SLAR is a technical assessment and does not identify site allocations. The methodology also now makes clear that the red, amber, green, or RAG for each question in the assessment, for each question is an assessment rather than a rating. This enables comparisons to be made between sites. As part of the local plan review, a number of evidence-based documents and the feedback from engagement will be used to develop a spatial strategy and preferred site allocations. The SLAR is one of those important documents. Members are asked to note the summary of consultation responses and agree to the strategic land availability assessment methodology. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. And can I thank all the individuals and organisations who did respond? Very interesting. I'm sure that the committee members have read them all, and we appreciate them joining in because it's important that they do. Without repeating anything that's gone before, any members got comments to make? Councillor Burrows, Councillor Pearson. Okay, Michelle, please.
Thank you. I've spoken to you already and I've got your answer, but I have a question from a resident in Wivenhoe. So I wanted to make sure I have an opportunity for it to be heard and so I can take the response back from you. So on page 60 of the agenda pack, which is page 8 of the amended Strategic Land Appraisal Assessment, existing green spaces are included as areas to be considered as sources of development land. This would reduce green infrastructure. And the resident goes on to say that it seems counterproductive when set beside the SLAA's SLAR's stated aim of finding sites to develop for more green infrastructure. Would it be better to exclude existing green spaces from the desktop review? Thank you.
Beth?
Yep, so I think it's important to point out that the desktop study is looking for sites not just for residential or economic built development. As members are aware, we are also have included a green infrastructure element of the call for sites, and will be assessing sites that are put forward for green uses as part of the green network. So that's why there may be existing areas of green space that aren't formally designated yet, that could be worthwhile as having some sort of formal designation to be part of the green network, so that's why it's included in there. It's not signalling that green spaces will be looked at in anything other than as part of the green infrastructure element. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll pick up on that theme, actually. It was around green infrastructure and how much emphasis is actually going to be placed on that in the SLAA. I have to say I've got difficulty having it called SLA. I don't know where the sh comes in.
Housing.
So why don't we just
it used to be strategic housing.
Yes, but I know it's not any longer.
I raised that point at the last meeting.
Why don't we just call it the SLAA or the
If
SLAA?
you've been here last time, I made the same point, Chris.
All right. So I'm struggling with that, but it's how much emphasis when you're doing the desktop reviews are we actually placing on green infrastructure? Because I think that may be where we've got ourselves into a bit of difficulty with Middlewick as well. I know you didn't want me to raise Middlewick, but I'll say, and bear in mind our green and blue policy. It's not just about land environment, it's also about our water environment, of which we have a fair bit in Colchester, and yet I don't think we've ever properly and fully economically made use of our water spaces around the city. So that's my question, thank you.
Beth?
Yeah, that's fine. So I think it's important to note that, so through the call for sites, whoever is promoting that site has to identify what use it's being promoted for. So if a site is being put forward for housing, they need to tell us, well, what type of housing? If it's being put forward as part of the green infrastructure, is it because of it wants to be open space or something like allotments? There's lots of different examples. So depending on what use it's been proposed for, then determines what it's then assessed for through the SLAA, as we're now going to call it. So yeah, I think it's what use it's being proposed for is how it's being assessed.
Thank you. We take the point about water. It's very important in the green and blue that we do focus on blue as well as green, and I think officers are well aware of that. Thank you for the question. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Criteria on page 75, distance to a secondary school and distance to a GP surgery. What's the point of having the distance if the school is already full or if the surgery is already overcrowded? Should we not be looking at certainly a secondary school that has places available rather than it just being there? Because otherwise we're just displacing the problem.
Beth?
Yes, so members will recall we had a bit of a discussion about this at the October committee when it was the draft methodology, and we'd lumped lots of services and facilities into one question, sort of through that debate at committee and through the consultation representations and the officers' workshop. We've now split that out into the 4 different criteria to measure distances. But we are aware that obviously needs to be a consideration for capacity of those facilities. So that is covered in the settlement boundary review on the settlement and ward level. I'm just checking because I think there's another question in the SLA about it. Let me just scroll and check. Or it could just be in the settlement boundary review. I'm not.
Simon, can you help here?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, of course, schools may have capacity for growth. And as part of the planned growth, we could seek contributions to grow that facility. So simply because there may not be capacity at the present time, the development process could give rise to developer contributions to grow the capacity at that facility. So the existence of the existing facility is a relevant consideration because it may be capable in itself of growth.
But there are some schools that do not have that capacity. I think of St John's School in my own ward, for example, which is heavily oversubscribed. Allowing development within 800 metres of that is no good.
I think Simon would say some do and some don't have that capacity.
Yeah. I mean,
Beth, have you found the relevant bit?
I think it's in the settlement boundary review, the work that officers have started to look at as that another piece of evidence base is where we have got criteria about the capacity of school facilities. So it is being considered as part of the local plan review. It's just not necessarily as part of the individual site assessments. It's more on a settlement level.
I would welcome other members' views if anyone feels that we should be making a specification that there has to be capacity at these sites rather than just a physical site.
I'm seeing nods all around the table for that, so yes, if you could take that on board, please. Simon?
Yeah, can we refine that further to the capability for growth of that facility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're generally agreed on that. Before I bring in Councillor Barber and Councillor Smithson, I knew I saw it when I originally read the report, but you might want to change on page 74 of the report and page 22 of the document. It says Amber, the site is within 401 and 801 millimetres of a primary school. Now that might be pushing it a bit. You might want to remove one of the M's, I think. Yes. So yeah, I remember seeing it, and then I didn't mention it in the briefing last week. But yeah, I think it's pretty important that we do change that. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Bethany, for the report. Firstly, just picking up on Councillor Smith's point about school capacity is an important one. We had a briefing actually at the County Council where we went in depth on every school in their capacity over the next so many years. All members from Colchester invited to that at county level, so I don't know whether it's worth me seeing if I can get that information to share to committee members. We went through with the education planning team in quite a lot of depth, and if it's not sensitive to that organisation, then maybe I could see if we could share that to committee members anyway. But just on my actual point, it looks like this was brought up in the minutes from the October meeting, but one of my major concerns about deliverability of sites in Colchester is Anglian Water's capacity for additional sewage in the area. In Langham, for example, I know there's constraints on a site due to sewage capacity there. And my question is, Anglian Water will probably say, well, we're going to invest in our capacity and this will be able to deliver this amount of expansion in infrastructure by whatever point, so it may make the residential allocation seem more attractive. How much scrutiny do we apply to third parties' representation on their capacity for infrastructure where it's not within the city council's control? So, for instance, a utility company that says we have capacity to deliver for our infrastructure for that site, but actually we may feel, well, we don't quite accept that position. It would be quite interesting to know. Or do we take it at face value, the evidence, effectively?
Beth and then Simon. Simon and then Beth, whichever way you want to. Beth.
Yeah, so there is a question within the methodology about delivery of necessary utilities, and that will be the source for information for that is the information from call for sites, but also from excuse me, discussions with infrastructure providers. That Anglian Water would be one of those, and there's, as we've heard earlier, there's a number of evidence-based documents that need to be prepared as part of the local plan review, and that would also be considered as part of the infrastructure delivery plan. And I pass it on to Simon if he's, and Sandra if they have anything further to add.
Simon?
Yeah, all I was going to say, Chair, in the case of foul water, there is a statutory duty under the Water Act for all new housing developments to have capacity to connect to the sewage system. And on that basis, the water treatment provider, so Anglian Water, would have to provide capacity for the treatment of that of the foul water arising. So it isn't actually, in the case of foul water treatment, it isn't really a problem per se.
Okay. Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Smith's comments, I understood that we were looking at a 12% decline in the number of children attending nursery and primary and secondary schools over the next 10 years. So I think unless Colchester is bucking the trend somehow, we may find we have more capacity than we expect anyway. That's from the government.
We very often buck the trend in Essex. Does anybody know? No? We will look into that and see what the figure is for Essex and Colchester in particular. Thank you for raising it, Councillor Smithson. Neither speakers, so I move to the recommendation. Note the summary of consultation responses and agree the strategic land availability assessment methodology. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 9. Another important issue item, adoption of the active travel and climate change supplementary planning documents. Shelley, please.
Thank you. Supplementary planning documents build upon and provide more detailed advice or guidance on policies in an adopted local plan. Officers have drafted 3 SPDs to communicate the Council's ambitions in respect to the climate emergency. The Biodiversity SPD was adopted in June, and this report asks the committee to adopt the Active Travel and Climate Change SPDs, which are both appended to the report. There's an addendum to the Active Travel SPD. A minor modification should have been made in the introduction to reflect that consultation has been undertaken and that it's the final document. As part of the process of drafting these SPDs, engagement took place with development management officers, the cross-service Climate Opportunities Working Group and members. And in accordance with the regulations, the draft SPDs were published for a 4-week period of public consultation. Appended to this report is a statement for each SPD which sets out a summary of the main issues raised and how those issues have been addressed in the SPDs. The Active Travel SPD aims to set out the principles the Council expects to ensure that development proposals respond to the climate emergency by delivering a high-quality, cohesive network of active travel routes. Chapters 1 to 4 of the SPD introduces the climate emergency and sets the context. Chapter 5 provides details of active travel infrastructure in Colchester. Chapter 6 sets out the elements that should be considered as part of new development proposals to encourage and support journeys by active modes. This chapter includes information on providing good quality infrastructure, improvements to existing infrastructure, provision of sufficient and good quality cycle and wheel parking, and information about other sustainable travel measures, promotion and community projects that will all help to encourage active travel. Following the local plan committee meeting in October, it was requested that information was provided on public transport, and amendments were included in Chapter 6 to include reference to the Essex Bus Strategy and Bus Service Improvement Plan. Finally, Chapter 7 sets out planning application expectations in relation to active travel modes. 9 individuals and organisations made representations to the Active Travel SPD. Overall, the responsive were supportive of the ambitions in the SPD, and the key changes made to the draft SPD include additional information relating to national and local strategies, policies and guidance, additional details on public rights of way, reference to the design of public transport interchanges, ensuring they're accessible for all, and further detail on car clubs and mobility hubs. Turning now to the Climate Change SPD, this is an ambitious SPD. It recommends that development proposals go further than adopted planning policies. It sets out the direction we need to take to build sustainable, future-proofed buildings. Like the active travel and adopted biodiversity SPDs, Chapter 1 introduces the climate emergency and Chapter 2 sets out background and context. Chapter 3 sets out the Colchester context. It includes relevant local plan policies, discusses the climate emergency declaration, and reference is made to the Net Zero Carbon Toolkit, which is a resource that's been prepared by leading technical expert and contains the very latest design, approach and good practice. Chapter 4 of the SPD includes guidance on improving layout and building design. Chapter 5 provides advice on renewable and low carbon energy. Chapter 6 explains the Low Energy Transformation Initiative, LETI. The LETI standard of net zero carbon includes energy use targets rather than a reduction in emissions and is current best practice. Chapter 7 includes advice on electric vehicle charging, which has been taken from the Essex Design Guide. Chapter 6 sets out water efficiency measures, and Chapter 9 provides advice for householder applications. 7 organisations made representations to the Climate Change SPD. Overall, the responsive was supportive of the ambitions in the SPD and the provision of further guidance to help applicants meet and surpass relevant climate change policies. Amendments that have been requested to the SPD have been made. These include referencing Anglian Water Services Water Resources Management Plan and amending references to Essex Planning Officers Association's documents. It's recommended that the Local Plan Committee adopt the Active Travel SPD, including the amended text in the addendum, and revoke the existing Cycling Delivery Strategy SPD and adopt the Climate Change SPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. And we've seen a few of these supplementary planning documents now at Local Plan Committee, and I think they all reflect very well on our officers for putting them together. I'm sure there'll be a number of comments and questions about these. Can I see who wants to speak? Councillor Dundas.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearson is certainly being a super sub tonight, speaking on every item. Councillor Barber, thank you.
I'll be brief because we have seen these before in draft format, and thank you for bringing them back. There's been a number of improvements. Just a comment and a question, really. Probably my comment, and I appreciate that there's perhaps not much we can do about it because it's not within our control, but I think on the active travel and on the sort of public transport side, there is quite a lot about what I'd call urban transport, but there's very little really about interurban, about connecting our actual different urban zones, Tiptree, Wivenhoe, villages, with Colchester, even perhaps sort of places like Stanway, Layer. You know, there's not much about that, and I think that we'd always have to remember that the borough or the city is quite diverse in terms of its needs of transport, and I'm just a bit worried it's very, very focused on the urban core of Colchester. My only question I've got is about I think it's chapter 7 about the EV strategy. Talk about charge points and actually providing them to houses, but one of the big problems with them is that if you've got your own charge point, your costs are probably about a tenth of that of somebody who hasn't. So people who haven't got on a driveway at the moment, if you public charge, it's about 80p a unit. If you can connect it to your own electricity supply, you can get it 7-8p a unit overnight. So you're paying a tenth of what other people are. So and looking at some of the way we lay out new designs of housing developments, even where people have got allocated parking, it's not always adjacent to the house. I noticed that there was a development coming through planning a couple of weeks ago, and even with some of the larger houses, the parking wasn't directly next to the house in what you'd call the old traditional format. So how are they going to connect up to their home electricity supply? And should we actually perhaps be going back to what we'd call the more conventional, old-fashioned design of the parking place is next door to the house?
I think that's probably out with the supplementary planning document, but it's a very good point. Shelley, do you want to come answer it, please?
Yeah, it is a very good point. I do think it is outside the scope of the SPD. I mean, we did have a bit of discussion at the October committee when the draft SPDs were brought about this, the electric vehicle charging section, and we did make a couple of amendments, including referring to the council recommending a home charging unit is installed. But I take your point that if the parking space isn't adjacent to the house, that's very difficult. And I think maybe that's something as part of the local plan review, and there will inevitably be a design policy in the local plan review, and something that officers can think about as part of that.
I think officers have heard the eye be minuted, and they will now go away and think about it. And I think also take on board the point about that interurban connectivity that you talked about. I think that's very important too. So thanks for raising it, Paul. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose, you know, I'm the newbie. So these are all new to me. I haven't seen drafts. So looking at the SPDs, I think there's some really good stuff in the three that are in front of us this evening. A couple of comments. One, the references that are in each of them all tend to be either local government or government produced references. And I'm just mindful of the fact that as councillors, we're all aware of a group that are currently making suggestions to the council on a regular basis. I'm surprised they're not here this evening, to be honest, where they are challenging the information that we are putting out. So I think it's essential that whatever we're using as our reference points for putting these policies together are fully tested, so that we know that we can argue back and say, no, this is accurate, this is evidence-based, it's based on best information that's out there. It's not a dictate, it's not some way of bamboozling everyone, but actually we've looked at a number of sources. We haven't just relied on the standard sources that everybody else is relying on. We've checked ourselves. So I think that's my main comment about what we've got in front of us. The second thing was just about the number of representations, or the feedback that we had seemed to me to be quite limited, and I'm wondering how we actually engaged with other organisations to ensure that we did get expertise coming back and looking at what we do.
Thanks, Chris. Shelley?
Yes, the references are largely government reports, Essex County Council reports, especially active travel, with Essex being the Highways Authority. But also these SPDs, they're all based, they all provide further guidance to the adopted local plan, which has an extensive evidence base as well. And I'd just make a comment about Essex County Council. They're doing a lot of work at the moment, commissioning a lot of evidence about the climate emergency, more sustainable buildings, and they have drafted some model policies that they're suggesting that all Essex authorities include in their local plans. And all of that, those model policies all come from evidence that have been commissioned by Essex County Council, and I think most, if not all of it, is available to view on the Essex Design Guide website. And consultation, yeah, the responses were quite low to the biodiversity SPD as well, which was adopted earlier this year. In terms of consultation, there's a requirement to publish draft SPDs for a 4-week period of public consultation, which we did. We've got a database of people that have asked to be notified of planning documents, all those people, and that includes statutory consultees, councillors, parish councils. They were all notified of this consultation and sent links to the documents. For the biodiversity SPD, which I know we're not talking about tonight as that has been adopted, but it's part of these 3 climate emergency SPDs, we did do a bit more engagement at the start of the process, but we actually went out to RSPB, Essex Wildlife Trust, Colchester Natural History Society and Natural England to actually seek their views sort of early on in the process.
Thank you, Shelley. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Shelley, for the report this evening. Whenever we have an SPD document come across our agenda, they're always high quality, and you're very receptive to feedback as well, both from members and external organisations. So that's really welcome, and both the SPDs here are again high quality work. So I can only say well done to you and your colleagues for those. In terms of SPDs and how we, I guess, monitor them, so they're, like I said, very good piece of work. But on an ongoing basis, what monitoring do we do to see how successful they're being as a policy and we're delivering against? Because I know they're only guidance to clarify existing, not only guidance, that diminishes them, sorry, but they're guidance to assist in local plan and policies. Is there any way, because I'm looking, for example, at the reducing overheating, seems all excellent proposals, but in reality, we have so many planning applications come through. How often are we going to monitor whether overall, as a decision-making body, how often we're adhering to favour dual aspects homes to allow cross ventilation as a policy for a planning application? Is there any way we can monitor, or are we monitoring SPD compliance or adherence sort of with a red, yellow, green on a planning application? Would that be too much work to do that? I'd just be interested in how we do monitor SPDs, because they're good work and I wouldn't want to see them sort of not really followed too much. Thanks.
Thanks, Lewis. Shelley?
Yes, we have thought about that, because it's very easy to write an SPD and then just have it sort of sit on a shelf and not be used, and we don't want that with these SPDs. So what we've done is we've created a climate emergency checklist, and that references all the elements in the active travel, climate change and biodiversity SPD. And if these SPDs are adopted, we'll be able to finalise that checklist, and then that can be used. We can ask applicants to fill it in as part of planning applications, and it will just be a useful way of applicants to be able to demonstrate in one document how they've complied with the SPDs and of course the policies that the SPDs relate to, and a way for officers and members as well to check that and monitor compliance.
Good point, thank you. Yeah, thanks, that's good question. Thanks for the answer, Shelley. Got no other speakers. Oh, Richard.
Sorry, just wanted to echo what several other people have said and explicitly say thank you to the officers for putting this together. And just wanted to also say, having seen a few developments from the other side, one of the wonderful things about this type of SPD is it does set the expectations really early. And if you can get this kind of thinking in from Riverside 1 and 2, it really does make things like the allocated parking spots that have the power, it makes it trivial, and it really does save everybody time and money by making it explicit from the word go. So well done.
Thank you for those comments, Richard, and yes, well done to the officers. Right, I'm going to take the two recommendations separately because of the amended text. Can you remind us again the amended text for the active travel one, please, Shelley?
Sorry. So the amended text in the introduction, it amends the sentence, the council has consulted rather than is consulting on this document in accordance with regulations and the council's statement of community involvement. All responses received have been considered rather than will be considered in preparing the final adopted version of this SPD.
Thank you very much. So with that amended text in the addendum, can we adopt the active travel SPD and revoke the existing cycling delivery strategy SPD? All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And can we also adopt the climate change SPD? All those in favour? Thank you. Oh, wasn't unanimous.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, Chair. Could
Yeah,
you
hands
up for a second?
Because I think we've got
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And against? And anybody abstaining? One abstention. Thank you very much. So that's passed. And we'll move quickly on to item 10, the infrastructure funding statement. And who's leading on this? Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an annual report which commenced back in 2020 as a government requirement. It effectively details the balance between funds received and funds spent, and gives you some colour with regard to how those funds have been spent and allocated and what has been achieved, including the number of affordable homes that have been secured and delivered. You'll be pleased to note, members, that this year we received approximately 3.6 million in receipts, and yet we spent 4.8 million and got that out of the door on very worthy projects. If members have any questions, be pleased to answer them. We have Jana Saxby, who is our Section 106 officer, with us this evening, so you can put a name to the face, and she does all of the number crunching, and an excellent job she does at it too. So There are two of us here and we're very pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, face to the name, I think, rather than the name to the face. Because we do see Jana's name quite a lot. Lee, councillor, score this, please.
Far too informal there. No, I mean, I first wanted to comment that it's a bit depressing when you see the low number of affordable homes that have been built, 74. Does that meet our target of around 30%? Because we should be looking at significantly more affordable homes being built than that, but maybe we had fewer developments because of the economic situation we're in. I guess the other thing is, as local councillors, so some applications can come in very quick. They might not be big ones, but they can give us some 106 money. How can we push forward things that we would like to see that money spent on? So, for example, there's one in Leisure that's for Wimpole Road, where there's some money going to the footpaths on Old Heath Rec, which is fine. That's local. But there's an argument that could have been maybe spent on the play park, maybe upgrading bits of the play park. That's just a hypothetical. So I'm just wondering how we kind of prepare for instances like that, because there's certainly, I imagine we've all got bits in our ward where we think, actually, if anything does come in, we do need money for that project, and 106 money may be the solution.
Thank you, Councillor Scordis. Simon or Jana?
I'll start and Jana, I'm sure, can finish off. I mean, the purpose of Section 106, as you're aware, is to mitigate the effects of growth. It's not to correct existing deficiencies, and therein lies the problem for all of us, really. With regard to proposed projects, we have a front-loaded system now, so we maintain effectively a list of potential projects, which we are pleased and have repeatedly welcomed and invited project suggestions from ward councillors and parish councillors to be brought forward to the relevant service area and to be added to that list. So there is a mechanism for you to do that. With regard to how the money is actually allocated, that forms part of every agenda to the planning committee, where there is a section on planning obligations and the suggested spend. So hopefully the new front-loaded system, known as the Infrastructure Delivery Plan, the IDP, has a list of projects which hopefully will grow exponentially, but I'm not sure if Jana has anything she wants to add to that.
Jana, anything to add? No, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Pearson, then Councillor Dundas. Chris?
Thank you. Just a quick moan, and that's that we refer to S106 in the report, which I'm presuming is going to be published. Can we ensure that we flesh out whenever we have documents that we say exactly what Section 106 is? Because I've got my head around Section 106 as a councillor, but I'm sure that any resident who doesn't know wouldn't understand what S106 actually refers to. I think the concern for me is looking at the amount of money that we've got sitting in the kitty from Section 106 money of £8 million that's unallocated. And I know, representing a ward in the second most deprived area in the city, that we've had very, very little spent on Beer Church over the years. And it just seems to me that we don't have a sound process for ensuring that Section 106 money is spent efficiently, effectively, and in areas where it's most needed.
Thank you. I would support that as representing the most deprived ward in the city. We have the same issue, and I think the most frustrating thing is the restrictions that are placed upon the Section 106s. There's a lot of, I mean, we had one recently. Simon was there at the planning committee. There was a development in my ward, and the leisure was going to be at Castle Park. That doesn't help Greensted residents much, I have to say. So, you know, I think we've got to get, maybe we should have a member, and about time for another member training session on Section 106 to explain it. And because £8 million does sound, and it is a lot of money, but I know it's held up in certain parts. It can't be spent on this and it can't be spent there in different ways. So if you could answer that point, that would be very helpful, and maybe we can think about Democratic Services organising a training session on Section 106. Simon, do you want to start? And Jana might want to join.
I'm sure we'll be delighted to do more training on Section 106. With regard to the point, which is very well founded, that the public wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about, on page 193 of the agenda, it does set out and explain within the statement, there is an explanation as to what Section 106 is. So that is set out within the report. But I'm very happy to do some further training, Chair. Totally understand the feeling with regard to where the spend occurs. We always try and achieve spend at the closest possible to the point of development. We have traditionally divided spend 65-35 between the ward projects and borough-wide strategic projects. As you appreciate, strategic projects, and by their very nature, can't be delivered locally because they're to cater for a much wider catchment. But we are very sensitive to the fact that the community that is bearing the growth should witness the benefits. And we do try and achieve that. It's not always possible, and sometimes it's held that there are sufficient facilities locally to meet the requisite need. But we do work very hard. And I have to say that hopefully the report will demonstrate that significant funds are brought in to mitigate the effects of growth in the borough, and hopefully through careful liaison with ward councillors, as Councillor Young will be aware, we try to involve ward councillors wherever possible, and clearly we need to try to do more of that and work a bit harder. Thank you, Chair.
Anything to add, Jana? No, okay. Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be delighted to know that actually most of my points have just been made by Councillor Pearson, your good self. I was going to pick up on that, and again, Section 106, and in fact, I was going to make the point about consulting on the local plan earlier. I don't think many people out there have a clue what a local plan is, or how it's relevant to them, so maybe you want to think about the wording of that. But yeah, I was certainly on the unallocated 4.294 million on leisure. There's a challenge there, I think, for us as members and for you as officers to really perhaps see how that gets allocated, because that's a lot of money sitting there, particularly when we know the challenges around leisure. And just to pick up on Councillor Scordus's point about affordable housing, it actually says in there, in relation to affordable houses, total number of units provided, which I think I take it have been in lieu of monetary contributions, so we don't see them as monetary contributions coming through, is 144, which seems a slightly healthier number.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. Nods all round. Yeah? Anything to add? No, thank you very much. I don't see any other. So with no decision required because it's for information only, but can we request Democratic Services put on a training session around Section 106, and then it's for us to encourage our groups to attend that session, because I think it's important. There is money there and we need to know how it can be spent and where it can be spent. So I'll leave that with you, Rob. Thank you very much. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Final item, item 11, the Authority Monitoring Report 2023. Now we have to agree this, approve this. Who's leading on this? It's Beth. Thank you, Beth.
Committee is asked to approve the Authority Monitoring Report, also known as AMR, for the period April 2022 to March 2023, and agree it be published on the Council's website. So some key findings of this year's AMR include that Colchester was awarded city status and Colchester Borough Council became Colchester City Council on the 23rd of November 2022. The total number of planning applications received in this monitoring period of 1,722 is a slight decrease on last year's total, but the figure doesn't include all applications, so things such as discharge of conditions and preliminary inquiries. A net of 711 dwellings were built in the monitoring period. That's lower than the previous year's total, and it is below the objectively assessed need target of 920 dwellings a year for Colchester, but that is largely related to a delay of completion of a student accommodation development at the University of Essex, which has now completed. It was just after the 31st of March. The council have taken on additional areas of open space at East Bay Mill, Maximus Drive and Iron Latch Lane. Officers also wanted to provide an update on neighbourhood planning progress, as this remains high across the city. Sorry, I scrolled too far. A neighbourhood plan survey was sent out to councillors earlier this year to help gain an understanding of neighbourhood planning experiences so far, to inform changes to our toolkit and the support, how our support could be improved. Responses were limited on that, so officers will resend that survey in the new year. But some key updates in terms of neighbourhood plans is that the Great Hawksley neighbourhood plan area was designated in June 2022. The Tiptree neighbourhood plan proceeded to a successful referendum and was made in May 23. The examiner for the Mireland and Braeswick neighbourhood plan review issued the final report on the 13th of September 2023 and concluded that the review plan meets the basic conditions and a referendum was not required. That plan was formally made by full council in October this year. And similarly, the Copford neighbourhood plan examiner concluded, subject to modifications, the plan could proceed to referendum, which took place in September this year, and the plan was formally made by full council in October this year. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shelley. I must be getting a bit sad because I found this quite fascinating actually, and it brought back some fond memories of the mayoral year with some of the notable things like city status and royal visit. But yeah, thanks. Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I am also sad because I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. It is. I had a couple of questions because this is the first one of these I've seen. So we have a total population of 192,700. We have 101,600 who are economically active, and we have 26,000 who are not economically active. We appear to have lost 70,000 people somewhere. Is that a quirk of the way figures are reported? Because I assume anyone who's not economically active must be inactive. Was the first question. And then the second question, I was dismayed to see the number of empty properties and the length of time that they're there. Are we able to break that down somehow so that members certainly would understand why properties are empty and for such long periods of time? Thank you.
Good questions, Beth. Do you know the answers?
So in terms of the employment figures, I think it's because anyone under 18 wouldn't be counted as economically or economically active, but I will check that and we can make a change. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you use the microphone if you're going to speak, Reese? Use the microphone if you are going to.
Sorry, could we just add a footnote to say excludes under 18s or something like
Yeah,
that?
that's fine. We
Thank
can
you.
check that and update that accordingly. And the empty properties point, I'm going to pass further down the table to Simon.
Simon, you're on the spot.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say we'll take that away and do some research for you?
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. Yeah, thanks, Reese. Good questions.
Sorry,
Yeah, another point?
sorry, Chair. If we break it down, could you break it down by ward as well, please?
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Any other points? Yes, Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Bethany, for the report. This very interesting piece of work. I think, for example, if you look at the amount of people going into the over 65 category, it just reflects some of the challenges we have in social care and our health service and other wider services that an ageing population puts pressure on. But also, I guess, reflects how we may need to look at different types of accommodation as well, older person accommodation. There's obviously a lot of focus on young people and getting on the housing ladder, but you also want to free up further down the chain to assist that. So it's really interesting seeing it statistically there. On the student accommodation point, you referred to the delayed application. Is it the case that one student accommodation unit now equals one unit for our numbers? Because that change isn't. Is it a quarter or a third? Or I'm going to say fractions until I get it right, but it's not quite. Is it 1-to-1 from memory?
So it depends.
Not Shelley, Beth.
No, sorry, that's fine. So it depends on the type of student accommodation. So if it is a like a studio flat, so it has like a kitchenette and bathroom, then that counts on a 1-for-1 basis. But if it's a cluster flat, then there's a ratio that's applied. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it isn't the 1-for-1. It is based on a ratio dependent on the student population for Colchester, because I know we do things slightly different to the national one. But I can find that out and send that in an email if you'd like.
Simon or Sandra might know because they were whispering to each other. Do you know?
We think it's 2.43.
Okay.
But we can confirm that, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Can I just ask one other small point?
Of course
please,
you
Chair?
can, Liz.
Thank you. Michael Gove. As
You
I
can't
think,
ask if you start with that.
No. This was the only agenda item I felt I might get away of asking this question. The government are potentially announcing revisions to NPPF anytime soon, I saw. Do we have any update on that may impact the upcoming year's monitoring report, for example?
Have you got the ear of Michael Gove, Simon? Apparently not. But it is expected, and as soon as we hear, then I dare say the officers will report to us all. Thank you very much. That's it. We need to make a decision to approve the 2023 Authority Monitoring Report, given the extra bits that we've asked the officers to go away and do. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda. Thank you very much for your attendance and contributions tonight, and have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.